What's up? This is Ray. Welcome back. Hey, if there's one thing we can say with photography is film is back, and it really looks like it's here to stay. So the whole point of this particular episode is we're going to be reviewing a very budget, medium format, black and white film. This is called Ultrafine Xtreme. They make it in ISO 100 and 400. They make it for 35 millimeter as well as medium format. But this episode, we're going to be focusing on the medium format. The significant thing about this film is it's arguably the most inexpensive medium format black and white film out there. It's about $3.69 per roll, whereas a Tri-X may be almost twice that. But the question is, how does this budget film compare to the Tri-X's and Ilfords out there? Does it hold up? I'm going to be showing you some image examples, and I have shot the ISO 100 and 400 versions, and I've shot about 12 rolls, and I actually developed them myself. So I'm going to be showing you the pros and cons, things I like about it, and some of the things I had to learn to overcome. So if you're curious about this film, stick around. We're going to be checking out Ultrafine Xtreme ISO 100 and 400 medium format film. Stay tuned. Okay, so the name of the film is Ultrafine Xtreme, right? And the reason they named it that is the grain is so fine that it almost looks like a powder in the 100 ISO version. And I'm going to show you an image of my daughter at a park taking some books out of a case. And the first time I looked and I saw the detail in the fabric, the sweat on the back of her head and the little hair follicles, I was amazed at how much detail the film was rendering. And actually, when I first saw it, I'm like, wow, it really looks digital. It looks like a digital image turned black and white. And I was kind of disappointed because the reason we shoot film is because we want that film look, that grain. But it took me a while to realize if I want grain, I should just shoot Tri-X or Ilford or something like that. There are times when you need as much fine detail as possible. For example, if you're shooting architecture or landscape or fashion, you need as much detail as possible, and it's important to have choices in that grain look. So the name Ultrafine Xtreme is very appropriate. And another thing that's appropriate about it is, I think I mentioned before, Fuji Acros is discontinued. So when I look at this film for landscapes and other things, there's times I can't tell the difference between it and Fuji Acros, and that is exactly what I wanted to find out. Can this film replace Acros? And I think it could. For some reason, it takes me a little longer to edit, a little longer to tweak. Maybe I just have to learn how its characteristics. But in the end, that final image, in a lot of cases, it looks awesome. Okay, so there's a couple technical things I want to mention about this film that may or may not apply to you if you're not the one developing it. But whenever you pre-wash a film to develop it, you usually will see a blue or aqua colored anti-halation layer wash off. I notice when I use this film, I don't see any anti-halation layer at all. It's a perfectly clear rinse. And real quickly, the purpose of the anti-halation layer is as light passes through the film, if there's anything behind it that is reflective, it can bounce back and reflect again through the film, and it can cause problems. It can cause something that looks like halos. And so the anti-halation layer, the purpose of it is to absorb whatever light enters the film and doesn't allow any to pass through. So, but the interesting thing is when I develop this film and scan it, I really don't see any problems or halos that may be caused by that. So it makes me wonder, is it inferior in any way because it doesn't have the anti-halation layer? Is it missing anything? That's something I really don't know. The next thing interesting about this film is when you scan it, it lays pretty much perfectly flat. There's some films, even more expensive films like Kodak, that will dry kind of curled, almost like a Frito-Lays. And when you go to scan it, the middle of the film will either be higher or lower than the edges, and that can cause problems with your scanner's focus. So the fact that this lays pretty much perfectly flat is awesome. It makes the scanning process a lot quicker and easier. So those are just a couple things I noticed in the time I used this film. All right, I'm going to say something that might be a little controversial. I may get some negative comments, but that's perfectly fine. There's no set manufacturer way to develop Ultrafine Xtreme. And what I mean by that is most manufacturers, when you open their film box, you'll see different developers, times, and temperatures as a baseline to start developing the film. But when you open the Ultrafine box, there's no information at all. When you go to the website, there's no information at all. So when I emailed the company rep and I asked him, what is the recipe to develop it in Rodinal? He said he doesn't know. He said, why don't I check the massive dev chart? But what a lot of people don't know is the massive dev chart pulls its information from different manufacturers. And different manufacturers' recipes kind of shift over time. And really, the question is, though, if Ultrafine Xtreme does not have any type of baseline recipe, then where is the massive dev chart getting their information? Maybe they're pulling from different users' experiments and putting it there. And there's nothing wrong with that, but what if you take a very important picture on your first roll of Ultrafine Xtreme? You don't want to be relying on someone else's experiment or what works for them, because everyone develops differently. It's like an unlimited combination. So I think it's, in my opinion, it's important for Ultrafine to have some kind of baseline recipe or setting for people to start out with, rather than depending on experiments, or you may have to try 10 different rolls before you find what you like. You may take a super picture in one of them rolls and it may come out bad because of that. So I encourage Ultrafine to do like most of the bigger manufacturers and have that baseline development setting. We will appreciate it. And I want to give you just a quick image of what I mean. This is the Ultrafine Xtreme 100 example on the massive dev chart. If you look at the numbers, they only have one example for ISO 100, but it's not to develop at box speed. It's to develop at 50 ISO, which means that you're overexposing it by one stop. Why would it not have a box speed example? Is this here someone's experiment? So this is an example of what I mean by not having definite times for Ultrafine Xtreme, and also wondering, where does this information come from? Oh, by the way, there's something kind of funny or interesting I wanted to point out. With this film, there's kind of rumors going around that it is a rebranded version of something else, and everyone kind of has an opinion, and I really don't have an opinion because I don't know all the different kinds of black and white film. But what's interesting is the films that people guess it is a rebranded version of, those films do have anti-halation layers, and this one doesn't. So that makes it even more difficult to kind of figure out what it is. And I actually, I think I asked that question on the company's Facebook private message, what is the history of this film? And they never really answered it. So I guess it's kind of a insider secret, which is okay. But it's just something to think about. What is the history of this film? Is it a fresh film on its own, or is it based on something else? I don't really know. All right, so that is my preliminary review of Ultrafine Xtreme. I developed about 12 rolls of it myself, so it's not a extensive review. Hopefully the images I show you will give you an idea what it looks like, shot and developed in Rodinal. And I have to say, one of the first rolls I developed was when I was learning And I didn't realize, that was the first time I realized that my fixer had worn out. And when the images came out, I was really disappointed. I said, wow, Ultrafine Xtreme sucks. And I didn't realize that my fixer had run out. So when I did some research online, I realized just all I have to do is mix another batch of fixer, dip it back in, and that fixed the problem. So developing film is a learning process, of course. And sometimes if it comes out bad, maybe it's your mistake with exposure, maybe it's your mistake with developing. So it all has to come together. And that's one reason why when you get a great image that you love, it means so much to you that you shot it on film, developed it yourself, got the right exposure and everything. You appreciate that picture so much more because you know everything came together and you did it yourself. It's almost like you feel like a mad scientist or something like that. Yeah, so I want to thank you for watching this review of Ultrafine Xtreme. I just kind of crushed this box. It's an empty box. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them below. I'll answer them the best I can. And hey, keep in mind, no matter what film you use to do your black and white photography and get inspired by. Until next time, as always, keep it real.